And so Lewis says, when we put first things first, we get second things thrown in. But if we put second things first, we lose both first and second things.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Hello and welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. My name is Tim Rush, and we're talking about leadership. And today I'm joined by James Henderson, and I realize I have no idea how to introduce James. Dr. James Henderson and I go way back, which makes me really curious of how this is going to go, because we could reminisce, or there could be really rich, deep things shared. So thanks for being with us. James, let me ask you, what should I say about you to introduce you? What do our listeners need to know?
I would say I'd introduce myself not as a doctor, but as an amateur. A really great mentor of mine from South Africa talks about the importance of us being amateurs in life, people who live life for the love of it, not because we're professionals or experts in anything, but just because we keep a deep passion for the simple things, and that we're all in kindergarten in life and in prayer and in everything we do. We're just learners together. So I'd say that's how I'd want people to think about me.
I think it should be said that James has been married for 25 years. Is that right?
Yep. Just celebrated 25 years with Erin. She's awesome. And the life we live together as a married couple is the adventures of life and marriage and mission together, cross-cultural living, raising kids, doing soul work and Crucible. I mean, my life is full of good things, and a lot of that passes through Erin,
Yeah. In our conversation leading up to this, I think you called her a fountain of wisdom in your life. And that's a picture. Yeah.
When Erin speaks, I hear God more clearly. That is for sure.
Yep. Yep. And you're a dad of two college-age kids?
Yes, Erin and I are just now experiencing the early stages of empty nest, and that's a lot of fun, but we miss our kids a ton. I think yesterday Erin took a picture of me and sent it to the kids. I was crying in my soup. I miss them so much. And but Kate is a junior nursing student at a Christian school in Texas, and Caleb is a baseball player who would study baseball as a career if he could, but is at college near Chicago and is freshman in school, just loves his life, and really proud of our kids. They're two amazing young people that make me so proud.
Yeah. James is incredible missionary, incredible leader. And if you didn't know all of that, but you met his wife and kids, you would know James is a good man. If this is who he's married to and these are the kids that he's raised, James has to be all right. But James has been a missionary in Mexico City or around Mexico City for close to 20 years now. Is that right?
Yeah, 21 years, I think.
21. Whoa.
Yeah, like, where does the time go?
Man. Yeah, so I do want to get into the leadership side of this, but I got to say, the stories that he has about living in one of the world's largest and craziest cities, living cross-cultural leadership. I don't know if it'll make it into the conversation, but he has stories of spending the night thrown in jail where other prisoners are saying to him, hey, would you tell us more Bible stories? Like, I don't know other missionaries that have that experience. So rich and broad reach and understanding and history that you have going on there. So James, first, share with us when in life, was it a moment or was it a period that you were living through that you turned around and you realized people were following you?
It's going to be a certain kind of leadership that I mentioned about that, but I think when I was a young mission student in serving and learning so much from a beautiful mission church in downtown Mexico City, just with great mentoring and a context for learning about what it is to follow Jesus, I think there was a moment where I was given opportunities to show up, and I think I turned around and noticed, hey, we're living life together in a way where we're learning to lead each other, and it has this deep sense of community to it. I think we had our eyes fixed on Jesus and each other in a way where it feels like we were just learning early on to kind of lead each other. So I was probably 18 or 20 years old, and I think that the Eugene Peterson probably says this, but I think this is where I heard this. But the Christian life is really about participation with people and the Spirit of God. That's what it is. As a Christian leadership is participating with people and the Spirit of God at the same time. And so I think as a young mission student, I looked around at my Mexican friends and what we were learning together, and I'm like, we're with each other and we're learning together. And I feel like that may have been the heart of early leadership lessons, that when we're listening to God together, when we look at each other and appreciate each other and care about the Christ that is being formed in us together, I feel like that's kind of the leadership that we were learning from a really young age. I think I don't know if people were following me as much as we're learning to follow God together, and we were learning to be followers before we were leaders at all in any way. And I think that may be critical to good leadership is good followership. We were following Jesus together.
So I wasn't planning to go this route, so I may ask this question, and you may say, "Nope, let's go different direction." But when you say following, I happen to know some of those leaders that you were following, and love some of those guys that you were following. So
Mm.
tell me about what was it that they were doing? How were they leading you that really blessed you on your journey?
See, I can get to my heart right away when you ask the question because of the beautiful people that God's put in my life. But there were leaders in my life at the time who saw things in me that I wouldn't see in myself in a million years. And I think God leads in the same way. He sees things in us that we don't see in ourselves, and He believes in us in ways that we don't believe in ourselves, and He trusts us more than we trust ourselves. And so I think God placed special people in my life very early on in formative years that shaped entirely how I see life in the kingdom and together, and that have influenced our way of serving and leading for a long, long time.
So can you think of a specific story where one of them required something more out of you than you thought you could give, or drew out of you something that you weren't expecting to be drawn out?
The first example that comes to mind is my friend and mentor Chad and Nancy Schrader asked me to lead a youth small group with peers my age in Spanish, and I think that I was like, I can't do that. I can't. What are you, crazy? And I'm not ready for that. And I think not being ready for something and being thrown into it is the mission way of Jesus. Get thrown into something where we feel in way over our heads and kind of look to God and each other to walk us through it. That I feel so thankful for early opportunities of saying, hey, would you just lead a small group? And that's mostly just listening and learning to listen to God together and care about each other. And it wasn't rocket science, but I was given opportunities to listen with people from early on, even when I didn't feel like I was ready to do that.
So what did it do for young James that Chad and Nancy Schrader trusted you with that?
I think it was a small door that opened up into a really big room, and the world opened up to me in ways that I fell in love with God and his people and Mexico and culture and adventure of the spiritual life and living on mission with God. They opened up a door to me that I've been walking around in this big room and big world since then in ways that are beyond my wildest dream, probably. Just getting to live a life of my dreams that has meaning with people that I just love.
Yeah, it's sincerely wild for me to imagine 18, 19-year-old James in Mexico City, because I know adult James. I mean, I knew you then, but I didn't know you in Mexico City. And when I see you in Mexico now, I have never seen another man that Mexicans respond to like they respond to you. Like when you speak, they listen. When your energy goes up, they're drawn in closer. You are the quintessential leader um, of Mexican men. Like it's really astounding. So it's amazing for me to think, oh, there was a journey there. There was a
Hmm.
learning curve, and I don't know if that's something that can be taught. Like, how do you repeat that? It because it was beautiful.
Hmm. I don't know. I I just think there's a lot of grace given in all of that. You know, I think our life with God and with each other, there's a dynamic to it of receiving and giving, and it's just like this receiving and giving loop. And I think I was just receiving what I was receiving from the Mexicans and from my friends was this gift of friendship and this gift of belonging and this gift of joy and this gift of fun and this gift of prayer and listening to God and walking with him in this big city and so then I was just giving back to them what I was being given from them and from others who were pouring into me. I don't Over all these years, I don't think I've ever done anything that I'm just kind of like I have an open hand where whatever I receive, I give. And that's kind of a freely you've received, Jesus says, freely give. And I feel like that's been a dynamic that's a part of my life. I'm just giving back to Mexicans the gifts that they've given to me or that God's given to me through them. And so,
Yeah. So a word that I'm hearing here, or that's coming up for me, is balance. That it's it's not just taking in, and it's not just putting out, but it's putting those two together, the taking in and the giving away. So when you are with young leaders, how do you help them live into that? Like how do you help young leaders receive and give as part of their makeup?
I wonder if it's about how we're learning to listen. Our attention is maybe the most important faculty and factor in our life. And so what we pay attention to determines everything. And so I think when I'm together with young or just peer leaders in Mexico or people in Latin America or anywhere else for that matter, I think the balance that comes is when we take time to listen and notice the most important things that God is actively doing in our life and what he's trying to show us and teach us. The balance comes through attention and
Yeah.
listening, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to pull on that thread a little more, and it may be the exact same answer, but and as we're recording this, we can see each other across the screen. And whenever I look at James Henderson, I immediately what comes up for me is you're one of the hardest working missionaries I know. You are on the go constantly. Um, you have enough to do in Mexico, and you are serving in California. You're spent a good time in South Africa over the last year. But what's true about you is balance. And I think we all need to lean into Sabbath more. So I'm not saying you're the best Sabbath out there, but you Sabbath well. So how do you communicate that to other leaders where you draw work and you draw real energy with the balance of well?
Like it actually makes me remember a verse that I just love. And actually in the margin of my Bible, I have written, is this the most important practice description in the entire Bible, just as far as practice goes? And it's back-to-back verses in Luke 5:15 and 16, where Luke gives us a glimpse into Jesus's balance. And it says, but now, more than ever, word about Jesus spread abroad, and many crowds would gather to hear him and to be cured of their diseases. And so Jesus is just like working. He is a man of action. He is on the move. People see in him what they find in Jesus the answer to their deepest needs. And he is just wildly popular, has this very active public presence life with people. And then the next verse, Luke piggybacks immediately. But Jesus would withdraw to deserted places often and pray. Hmm. And so, like, the balance that we want, Jesus shows us how. It's like action, action, action. Yes, we're meant to be present in the world where God is needed most. But then there's this private, hidden life too, where we have to get away like Jesus did to quiet places where we can receive from God and rest, where we let him take care of us while we're actively engaged in trying to take care of others. You know, just Jesus, that giving and receiving balance was just such a dynamic part of his life. And Jesus shows us how, if we can pay attention enough and then have the discipline to, in spiritual formation language, and this is from Ignatius of Loyola, but people would look at the way Ignatius of Loyola and his company of Jesus would live their life, and they would describe them as contemplatives in action. So they were like, it's kind of like, we might say, reflective practitioners, right? That it wasn't that they were just in action all the time. Mm-hmm. They were also thinking about their action. And it's not that they were just thinking and contemplatives all the time. It's that they were in action. And so they lived this beautiful balance. And you can see that in the life of Jesus. His extraordinary balance is unbelievable. You never see him burning out. You never see him ready to throw in the towel. You see him getting away with people that he loves, doing things that he enjoys, where God meets him closely, whether it's mountain climbing or fishing or going on long walks or getting away to rest and time in solitude and silence and eating good meals and celebrating life. Jesus has this extraordinary balance of God pouring into him, and then Jesus is able to pour himself out to others and respond to whatever is the need right in front of him with just the right energy and tone and strength. I could learn to be balanced like Jesus. Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine the freedom and joy and strength that would feel like. I have a long, long way to go to learn Jesus-like balance.
When you say mountain climbing and fishing and good meals, it makes me think when they're up on the mountain and we see it in our Bible story, Mount of Transfiguration. And so the thought is, Jesus took them up on this mountain to experience the Mount of Transfiguration. And as I grow older, I think, I don't think that was his plan. I think he was with a bunch of guys and like, hey, see that mountain? Who's going to get to the top of it? Like, they're men and there's a mountain, so get to the top of it. And then God surprised them with something amazing. But I love that playful, restful side. I do wonder, so if you were talking to young James, a young missionary, new dad in Mexico City, or imagine other young leaders, and you were wanting to talk to them about balance and finding rest, what would they hear about that would feel risky? Why would it be risky to rest?
I think as missionaries, and maybe a lot of people feel this kind of pressure, like we've been given so much, that we feel like there's a lot required of us. To whom much is given, much is required. Mm-hmm. And so people trust us so much on mission and give us so much that, man, I feel so responsible for having a really good work ethic, and people sweep garages and teach kindergarten and plow fields so that we can do what we do in Mexico. And so I think that there's a deep sense of our responsibility to do good in the world.
Yeah.
And I know that every young missionary, probably any young minister, or anybody looking to make a difference, feels that kind of pressure to perform. But I think if you don't get the first things right about where you're being nurtured by God, it can all fall apart real fast.
Say more about first things.
C.S. Lewis says something that I just really, really love. He talks about how keeping important things central and not letting the peripheral things like performance determine where we spend all our time. But he is talking about the principle of first and second things. And he talks about it in a letter to a guy. He said that Jesus tells us to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And so Lewis says, when we put first things first, we get second things thrown in. But if we put second things first, we lose both first and second things. And so I think first things for a young missionary or anybody who's leading is to get relationship and time with God right. That foundation is set, and then outcomes and fruit and success gets thrown in. But if we take our eyes off of God and don't spend much time with him, or we don't have time for prayer or time for reflection, time for deep soul work, time for rest, we're going to find ourselves giving ourselves away far more than we have the capacity to support. So first thing is life with God and connected to Jesus as the vine. And then I think fruit comes as a natural result of that kind of life. And it doesn't happen the other way around, me just trying to do something big for God that, not spin my wheels and run myself ragged. I think first things first is God and I are in listening presence together, and he is guiding and dictating the pace. And people who know me best know that I'm awful at keeping that kind of balance, even though I do have it in mind and want to live that way.
Yeah, and I get the story I tell myself is that you are a harder judge on yourself than those around you, but I get it. I get it because we never feel, and why is that? We never feel confident in have I found that place where I'm supposed to be. Well, let me go back and I feel like this is asking the same question just another way. But when we talk about what's at risk to rest, it makes sense that it's risky what we would communicate by resting. And are we doing a good job? And will others think we're doing a good job? And do I deserve to rest yet? But the other side of that is what's at risk to not rest? What's at risk not to develop that time away, that relationship with God, and that time for yourself to let that pressure valve release?
I think like what's at risk for me to have a good rest balance in my life is that it's taking a risk that I might not feel as important, or I may lose influence, or that you know um, my self-serving need to feel important might have to take a back seat to having a life that's being refreshed and rejuvenated by God, where I can live in the world in a way that he's dreamt for me to live in it. It's comforting to know that maybe it takes a long time to really figure all this out, and give ourselves some grace while we figure it out. I have a friend that says, a professor, Dr. Chris Hawley, just says spiritual formation is the slowest of all movements. Like this journey towards Christ-likeness is the slowest thing of all time. And I am nowhere near what I want to be for God at all. And that you know what? God is real patient with my progress or lack of it. He's like, he's not as big a hurry as I am for transformation. He sees from a big picture, and he knows where my life is set in the direction of, and that's what he's concerned about. Everything else is like, hey, chill. Like you said, I'm harder on myself than anybody else, and I think that God might tell me to relax a little more about my transformation journey, and that he's right here with me. And the spiritual formation life is usually 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, or 3 steps forward, 1 step back, and that's just kind of part of it. We see that probably in every disciple seen in Scripture, in Christian history, and in ourselves and people around us. There's some breathing room that we probably don't give ourselves that God would love for us to experience. And um, Aaron and I did the spiritual exercises in the fall. We got to have a sabbatical and get away from country and continent even. And we did a 30-day experience of the spiritual exercises of Ignatius of Loyola. It's like a deep meditation into almost every scene in the gospel life of Jesus. It's just a powerful experience of deepening in friendship with God. But in that, this is what I want to share. In that 30-day journey, not one time did I sense from God that I need to try harder. We try so hard, and I'm from West Texas, and like Matthew McConaughey says, he says God loves a trier. And the Rocky movies are my favorite movies because Rocky is a trier, and I love that kind of underdog hustle, try, work hard. But also at the end of the day, I think that what God requires is a heart that is in love with Him and the world He made and the people around us. And that's the part we need to get right with, maybe without the need for some kind of performance review all the time, or am I good enough? Am I living up to people's expectations of me or my own expectations? I think what God wants is a heart of love for Him and people. And if we're in that posture, that approach, that attitude, that spirit, that's seeking first the kingdom, and everything else gets thrown in after that.
And I can picture my kids and how I love my kids like they are.
Yes.
And I'm human, so that there can be a switch that's flipped when I start to think about what they're doing. How does it reflect on me? Like, how
Oh, yeah.
do I look as a dad? So that's a shadowy projection. The only time that I want them to try harder is when I'm concerned about how does it look on me? How does it
Oh,
make me look on a dad? But whenever I just sit in what is my ideal self, loving my kids, oh my goodness, they are welcome and they are
mm,
loved and they are accepted because they're my kids.
yep.
And the thing I love about putting it that way is God is so much more confident than I am. I don't think what I do, God goes, oh, how does that make me look as a God? I think he just sits there in the ideal loving father stance and loves what we do.
This parenting thing, and now Aaron and I are parenting adults, and they're such beautiful young people, Kate and Caleb, And I think about everything that I did wrong as a dad, and I would look at Aaron when I'm griping at the kids. I'd be like, I am wounding him right now. And do you know what? I think love covers a multitude of sins. I think that even the ways we mess up, God has this extraordinary way of working it for good. I mean, if we really believe stuff like that.
Yeah. So quickly tell the story about the first game you got to watch your son play college ball.
We were in Arizona just a few weeks ago, and Caleb had his first college baseball tournament, and he's really just now learning to pitch, has a really good arm. And his first college game, his debut, he gets put into the game with the bases loaded and nobody out. And talk about baptism by fire. And the coach threw him in there to see how he'd respond. And
Yeah, so let me just highlight here, freshman catcher just starting to pitch. I mean, he's played baseball forever. Catcher. Okay.
yeah, and his dream is to play college baseball, and he worked so hard to get to where he is, and he is playing with, I mean, big time, big time baseball. And so he gets on the mound. I'm sure he's nervous. There's no telling the thousand thoughts that are going through his mind. Well, he hits the first batter, and so he walks. I mean, hit him hard in the ribs, and walks the first batter in. Uh,
Well
this
done, Caleb. Well done.
the next guy coming up weighs about 225 pounds. Is just a athletic, strong dude, and I'm like, oh no, you know. And Caleb is he gets down 3-1, and so everybody in the stadium knows that he's going to throw a fastball right down the middle. Well, this big baseball player saw it coming down and hit a grand slam that went to the highway outside the park. So there we're watching Caleb, and I know he's down, he's distraught. That was like such a difficult college debut. And so there was a doubleheader, and we didn't talk to him for a couple of hours, several hours. And after the second game, we wanted to give Caleb his space. I asked the coach actually during the two games. I said, "You have any advice for me as a dad? Like how do I be with my son? What do I say to him when he's down?" And his coach is so cool. He said, Caleb is showing great progress at pitcher, and we see a lot in him. And he didn't show that right now. It's his debut. He's going to be okay. But he said, tell him that life is hard, and tell him that you got to do hard things if you want to get out of your life what you want. Tell him that. And so anyway, afterwards we saw Caleb a few hours later, and I wonder how he's going to be. And he comes up with a smile, and he gives me and his mom a hug. And he's like, I'm going to be okay. He pulled a game ball out of his pocket that he wrote on. And he said, I wrote on college debut pitching, one batter hit, one grand slam, only up from here. And I think that if he can bounce back from that kind of disappointment, whatever he does in life, he's going to be okay. And I wonder if we're all the same way. If we can bounce back with a spirit kind of like that, God knows it too. We're going to be okay.
I love that story. One, it says this kid knows he's loved. Like that just says a boy that's mature knows he's loved by his.
I think what love does for us more than anything else is love gives us courage.
Mm-hmm.
When we know we're loved, fear kind of moves from its spot of being central in our life.
Yeah, and I mean that kid, and he's not a kid, but since I knew him when he was a kid, I feel good calling him kid. People, if you see a Caleb Henderson baseball card one day, buy it because it's going to be worth something. And if he's not a baseball player, whatever job he does, he's going to be worth something because he's looking at this going, hey, it's only going to get better from here. What an amazing young man. So that's the leader that grew up in your household. And I love spending time with you in Mexico City because I get to see the leaders that come up around you and look like they've been loved. They look like they've been loved well. And you're right. It seems like that kind of, not kind of, that eases the fear around them and gives them bravery to step into those hard things. So we didn't get to the spending the night in jail, and a pretty. I mean that sounds. Oh, spend a night in jail. No, it was a pretty scary place. It was a pretty scary jail. Pretty scary things happening. But I remember a lot of times in Mexico City, your response was, this is what we do. This is what we do. And what you meant was, we do hard things. And so when hard things are there, this is what we do. So it is not surprising at all for Caleb and Kate, adorable Kate, to not shy away from really, really hard. So James, imagining the scope of what you've just shared right now, if you were sitting with a young leader right now, what would you want their takeaway to be?
I think a life of listening to God as you participate with people and the Spirit of God is a very big deal, and what we pay attention to, letting God set his gaze on us and reminding us that we're loved, will be the kind of leaders that reflect that kind of love to other people. I think Jesus makes people feel so loved. Whoever comes near him, no matter who they are, they feel loved because Jesus knew himself as one who was loved by God. And it's just pouring through him. I think Henry Nouwen said, my brother-in-law, Josh Tracy, has this quote on his water bottle. And it's a Henry Nouwen quote. It says, the true work of prayer is sitting quietly so that we can hear the voice of the one who says good things about us. And I think we need to spend time letting God love us, and what people will get from us, I think, is that same kind of love.
That is so good. And specifically, it's good for me today because I do have this compartmentalization mentality that says, work on that leadership 1, 2, 3 step. What's the 1, 2, 3? How can I do this better? And it is not separated from my relationship with God. And I want it to be. I want to compartmentalize it and grow there. And it seems like God is continually saying, no, sit with me a little bit more, and let's see how this goes. So thank you for this. And I see that in you. I see that you are that guy that sits with God, and you're sustained from his care for you, and that you don't hoard that, but you give that to everybody around you. So thank you for being one of those leaders in my life and my family's life.
Thank you, too.
Thank you, James, very much for being with us on this podcast. This podcast comes because I want to learn how to be a better leader. And part of that is hearing stories and hearing about your walk and what that looks like. And that spurs me on. So thank you for this. Listeners, if there's anything from this that's been a blessing with you, I encourage you to share that blessing. Note when you're talking with others and you think, this was good for me to hear, it might be good for them too. So share this with other people, because on this journey, we are creating the world that we want to live in. And so conversations like that are a part of that reproduction. So thank you for being with us, and may God bless your day.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. Or if you're ready to get started on your transformational journey right now, you can connect with one of our Crucible certified coaches for a free 30-minute session at thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. That's thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. If you like what you heard, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you're listening, and don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening.